Hello and welcome back to the World Championship in Through the Ages. After not being able to win the last three-player game and only finishing second, the group standings are quite tight at the moment. Fjantarik is in the lead with 10 points, however he has already 4 games finished, while I and Gandin have only 3 games finished with only being 1 point behind, so we might have the slightly better position. And then Kogito is also not that far behind with 6 points but already 4 games finished. And the game that we are taking a look at today is a 3-player game against Gandin and Fjantarik, so the 2 players that at the moment are equal or in front of me. So that could be a very important game. If I should manage to win this, I should be in a comfortable position, while if I should lose this game, then both of those opponents have already a bit of a lead and I'm a bit under pressure to get some wins in the remaining games. Alright, so now without further ado, let's take a look at the game. In this game I am playing in the first position, and first of all we can take a look at the leaders and wonders. And we can see that there's only a little bit of lab synergy in H3. We have Bill Gates, but apart from him basically no synergy. In the leaders we have the Manhattan Project, but also no spaceflight, no internet. Then we have some theater leaders with Chaplin, Marlene Dietrich and Fleming. However, there's also no Hollywood, so also no very big payoff in for that kind of strategy. We have Pierre, but no internet. We have Churchill, but no Gandhi. For the military, there's also Mandela in the game, but maybe the potentially very high-scoring wonders are not really available with the internet, Hollywood and spaceflight. In H2 we have a bunch of culture leaders with Bach, Shakespeare and Gaudi. We have the 2 science leaders with Newton and Nobel. We have Maria Theresa and the Ocean Liner Service, and Robespierre is the military action leader. Apart from the Ocean Liner Service, we have Suez Canal and Harvard College as very strong wonders. There's the Suez Canal but no Cook. In H1 we have the 2 science wonders, Universitas and Silk Road. There's the Forbidden City, but no St. Peter's Basilica. We have the Machu Picchu's economical wonder, a Great Wall is there but no Himeji Castle. We have 1 military action leader as well in H1 with Joan of Arc. Genghis Khan, Barbarossa, and Nostradamus can help with the strength as well. Isabella is there, also Barbarossa for some colonization synergy with Leonardo but no Gutenberg, and then also Saladin as a very solid leader. The first decision in this game was relatively easy for me. There is Confucius available as the only leader and Hanging Gardens as the only wonder, and Confucius is of course very strong. Both of those wonders might be taken away, but some other new wonders could be revealed, and also skipping the wonder with having Confucius and those potentially interesting H1 wonders to get early available should, it's just taking Confucius should definitely be the best. Fjantarik then goes for the Stonehenge. And Gandin makes an interesting choice. He goes for the urban growth and the frugality, so just 2 yellow cards, doesn't want to go for Cleopatra. She is maybe not working ideally with there being 3 resource step wonders with the Colossus and the Pyramids, and also he doesn't know at all what wonder he will be getting at which civil action cost. Hanging Gardens he maybe also doesn't like that much, so he just goes for urban growth and frugality. Interestingly takes frugality over the rich land, but that definitely is understandable. Maybe there's the danger that he has to skip the HA wonder, and then maybe having more population earlier could be important to have an additional way how to spend the resources. There's actually only 1 wonder revealed, the Rome Road, so here I have some different options available. I could just do some normal stuff. I could go for Confucius, build a mine and increase my population, take the Hanging Gardens as my wonder. That could be perfectly fine. I could make a decision of maybe building a mine, taking the Rome Roads for 2 civil actions, making it that Gandin has no HA wonder available. However, I do think that would be a bit of a mistake, because that could just, I think it's costly for myself to take the Rome Roads for 2 civil actions here. A wonder that already costs 4 civil actions by itself. So I do think that would be costly, and then that costly choice might just even reward Gandin if he then gets an early Universitas or Silk Road or maybe Forbidden City. So I didn't really want to take that and then maybe just rewarding Gandin with my choice. But I also didn't like it too much to take the Hanging Gardens. I do think it would be perfectly fine. The Hanging Gardens is definitely playable. But on the other hand, when there are such interesting H1 wonders that I could get, I thought that maybe I am indeed willing to skip the HA wonder for now. Maybe the Rome Roads could still be around. If not, I do think it's likely that maybe the Engineering Genius could be around, because both Fjantarik and Gandin still need to take and elect a leader. Taking the Engineering Genius for 2 is maybe too costly for them, so I might get the Engineering Genius, and with that, together with the Ridgeland, it might even be relatively easy to finish such an expensive wonder like Universitas or Forbidden City, but maybe there is also a chance that Rome Roads are still around, especially if there's maybe an early H1 wonder revealed that Gandin maybe also could then potentially take, or maybe both Rome Roads and an H1 wonder could be available, so I just took the Ridgeland here at the end. I draw the Phalanx tactic and a good harvest. Fjantarik makes the decision to go for Cleopatra, doesn't want to go for one of those aggressive military leaders, and with the Stonehenge, Cleopatra definitely works very nicely. He just builds the first step of the Stonehenge and then builds the third mine. There's an early Iron coming down the road, the first card from H1 that will fall down to 2 civil actions for Gandin, and he is willing to take it immediately, skips the HA leader for now, and for now just builds the second lab, increases his population. With building the second lab he gets some science earlier, meaning that he's guaranteed to be able to develop the Iron in 2 turns, which could be nice, and while he doesn't go for an HA leader for now, maybe he still has the chance to get Ashoka at the next turn. That also means he skips the HA Wonder for now, could maybe go for the Machu Picchu the next turn with having the Iron. I of course want to seed with Confucius and seed a good harvest into the deck. I want to keep my tactics, so that should be the best choice. The development of agriculture is revealed, and I think this turn I have a relatively strong turn. I can build my second lab, increasing my science production, and of course I could still wait for one of those H1 wonders, but Gandin also is waiting for one, and he's been playing in front of me, so here I thought now it's better to just commit to the Rome Roads. Taking the Machu Picchu without having knowledge whether I get the second copy of Iron or not is, I think, not the greatest choice, so I just took the Engineering Genius, the Rome Roads, that even allows me to finish the Rome Roads guaranteed at the next turn, and then I just increase my population, because if I indeed want to just finish the Rome Roads, then I could have some corruption issues, especially if there are some developments revealed, and I don't think there's any other actions that is really worth doing, so I just increase my population, have a free population for potential development of warfares or religions, and can just finish the wonder maybe at my next turn. I draw the Trade Routes Agreement and an aggression. Fjantarik increases his population, builds the second lab to use Cleo's resource again, and then will again increase his population to get out of corruption, and takes the Theology to have a Happy Face solution in hand. Then it's Gandin's turn. He will now go for Ashoka, elects him, increases his population, takes the warfare. While he has delayed his HA leader for quite a while, it's maybe not too bad, because if you go for Ashoka, oftentimes it takes a little while until you can get a full bonus going anyway, and so maybe it's just worked out perfectly fine for him getting a leader that takes a while to get the full value anyway, and he gets him now and immediately gets the full value, so that is looking quite nicely. And at the next turn, thanks to the additional resource from Ashoka, he is able to build an Iron Mine directly, saving a civil action, and with that also maybe helping Ashoka, because he is maybe a leader that needs some civil actions to work nicely, but he will now save a civil action to build the Iron directly, get some production going. Definitely doesn't have a bad start, especially if he maybe can get also one of those strong H1 wonders soon. Now it is my turn. I seed the aggression into the deck as a Confucius event. The development of trade routes are revealed. I will build the first step of the Rome Roads, and that's maybe already an indicator on what I will be doing, because this turn I will just finish the Rome Roads and just increase my resource production, but with getting the additional yellow token I will also increase my food production, and that is just very nice. I get all of those civil actions out of the way. Nonetheless, one thing that I considered, or two things that I considered, were to, if I maybe should take a copy of Code of Laws, have some additional science, and it could just be nice to invest the additional science from Confucius into a copy of Code of Laws now, having an additional civil action to work with, but I didn't have a very easy way to get out of corruption. I think I actually did. I could take the Code of Laws, develop it, and before I use the Engineering Genius in the Rome Roads, I have 1 blue token more, so increasing my population is enough to get me out of corruption. But then I would need to spend another civil action to just take something like patriotism and frugality, which I didn't really like that much, or I built the first step of the Rome Roads without the Engineering Genius, so this turn just didn't feel that smooth. I also considered taking the knights, but that turn of course then also doesn't work that nicely, and so at the end I was just willing to finish the Rome Roads, get the production going. Very likely I will miss out on the Code of Laws, but maybe that can be fine, and maybe instead I can, for example, go for this copy of Iron at the next turn. So I will just finish the Rome Roads. I will draw 2 cards, the Reds and the Knowledge of the Ancients. Fjantarik takes the Code of Laws, develops it, and finishes the Stonehenge. That looks like a perfectly solid turn. I was hoping that maybe Gandin wouldn't take the Code of Laws. At least if he takes it, it is guaranteed that the iron will be available for one civil action for me. Gandin seeds in the development of warfare is revealed. He will use the frugality to increase his population again, takes the Code of Laws, develops it, and then builds a third warrior. So it's an interesting turn, because he is actually willing to delay the iron for quite a while in order to get a fifth civil action going. I'm not sure if I would agree with this choice. I do think now building Iron Mine directly could be quite strong. On the other hand, maybe he's worried that when the event deck will be flipping soon, that he could get hit by some strength events, and is now willing to build this third warrior to be a bit stronger, already prepared for that, and then gets the civil action going first. But now it might take at least a little while until he can get the iron going, and I think some early iron production could have been potentially quite strong here. But the Code of Laws, of course, also not bad to have, and then Gandin will also take the Swordsman in order to get the full Ashoka bonus going again. Now it's my turn. I see the Knowledge of the Ancients into the deck. I am a little bit tight on civil actions. I want to get some iron upgrades going this turn, so I really didn't want to see the reds, and I could have also just seeded a Trade Routes Agreement as in a Confucius event, but as when we take a look at Gandin's civilization, he actually doesn't have any wonder at the moment, so the Knowledge of the Ancients has the potential to give some nice value for both me and Fjantarik against Gandin. I will then open the development of Civil Life that I can just use to increase my population. I will also be able to take the Free Warrior. The development of Civil Life is actually quite nice for me, because I think it doesn't change that much. It is nice for me because I'm tight on civil action, so it's nice in that regard, but I could have taken the Free Warrior without having an uprising, because I actually was still in the area, the other area of my yellow banks, so I could have still gone for 2 iron upgrades, but it's definitely not bad to already be a civil action ahead, and this turn I just went for the iron, and thanks to the Richland A that I've taken earlier, which was definitely not the ideal grab at the time in order to delay my wonder, so that could have been an argument to just take the Hanging Gardens, but now it's actually quite nice, and it allows me to go for an upgrade quicker, and with that basically is worth 2 instead of only 1 resource. I could have maybe taken Nostradamus, but if I don't go for 2 upgrades, I have some trouble getting out of corruption, and also there could be some other interesting leaders. Maybe Saladin could still be available at my next turn. Barbarossa, with me having some food saved up and with having knowledge about reds, could be interesting. And Joan of Arc, maybe to get an additional military action, could be nice as well. Leonardo, I will have to see if I find the civil actions to set up the alchemy and go for Leonardo, but potentially could of course be strong as well. I draw the second copy of Phalanx and an aggression. Fjantarik seeds in the development of crafts are revealed. He will go for the Universitas, takes maybe also that wonder away from Gandin, but of course the Universitas is also very strong for himself with having Cleopatra, so I don't think there was any denial reason involved, or that was probably just a reason on top of the already existing reasons to go for that wonder. Fjantarik builds 1 step, takes Nostradamus in hand, can now replace Cleopatra as soon as he wants to, but keeps Cleopatra around to still be able to use her additional resources at the following turn. And then he also goes for a 3rd warrior, reveals the Legion tactic, and with that is the strongest and is nicely prepared for potential strength events that might be coming. Now it's Gandin's turn. He actually goes for a 4th warrior, maybe to get out of corruption together with building a mine. Now he gets out of corruption, but now he doesn't have the chance any longer to build an iron mine directly. He's actually forced to take the alchemy for 3 civil actions, because he has some hand space issues after having gone down on science so low after developing the Code of Laws. The alchemy is not bad, of course. He can go for 2 upgrades, get some science production going, but it feels a little bit clunky, and maybe with having gone for the iron instead of the Code of Laws, maybe some of those things could have been prevented. On the other hand, building this additional warrior and revealing the fighting band tactic at least makes him the strongest, and maybe going for some science production now first is also not too bad. Also he takes Saladin in hand, but for now wants to keep the Ashoka bonus. My turn, I see the 2nd Phalanx tactic into the deck. I sadly get hit by a strength event here, the Barbarians. The culture I think was relatively close. I sadly was 1 culture ahead, but of course I also would have won the tie breaks, and sadly I have to lose a population, which is of course not ideal. And then this turn, it's a bit of a question on what to do. I at the end made the decision to actually go for the monarchy here. It's a way to spend my science and get an additional civil and military action going. sadly both of copies of Code of Laws are already gone, so with that it could at some point be a bit limiting to be stuck on 5 civil actions with the monarchy, but being stuck on 4 civil and 2 military actions for longer could also be a bit tricky. I could have gone for Joan of Arc though, that might have been a fine choice, but sadly I didn't have the chance to get a free religion, meaning that maybe Joan of Arc is not that great, but maybe just to get a 3rd military action and leaving myself open for an H3 government form, it could be nice. On the other hand, maybe there could be Dark Ages seeded, has been seeded by one of my opponents, so maybe spending the science is not too bad, and then instead of Joan of Arc, I thought that maybe I could potentially still go for Barbarossa, or maybe Leonardo, but Barbarossa maybe also doesn't work perfectly for me, so maybe just going for Joan of Arc here could have been fine. At the end I made a decision to spend my science, at least I will have some more civil actions to work with, and it might also be important because being stuck on 4 civil actions and then having that big iron production ongoing could make it quite difficult to spend it. There are some nice H2 wonders, taking them with being only on 4 civil actions could be quite a bit tricky, and I also at least had a little bit of hope that maybe I could have a chance to get a Forbidden City at the next turn, which would make the monarchy a lot better, but I was fearing that very likely it should be taken away by Gandin. But maybe if the Forbidden City stays on 2 for Gandin and he maybe wants to go for the alchemy, who knows, maybe there's a world where he doesn't end up, where he ends up to not taking it, and with that I was at least hoping that maybe that could be still around at my next turn. Then I will increase my population 2 times and just get my iron production going. Sadly, increasing my population 1 time and getting the iron upgrade going is not enough to get me out of corruption, which is a bit annoying because I kind of would have preferred it to leave a little bit more food saved up to make Barbarossa a better leader for me, but after getting hit by the barbarians and with that the food increasing the population cost 1 food less, which then sadly caused not getting out of corruption with just increasing population once and going for the upgrade, and at the end I just went for another upgrade. Maybe it's still fine to go for Barbarossa for 1 activation and then replace him soon, or maybe get some food production going to get a bit more of value out of him, but I kind of would have preferred it to save up some food. Maybe it could have been worth it to just take corruption, but the alternative now I could spend my actions is also not that great. The urban growth I don't really need. Maybe bread and circuses. I guess bread and circuses for Pierre could be nice. Maybe there's then the danger through that there is a chance that Barbarossa is actually discarded before my next turn, if maybe Fjantarik goes for something like cartography or ridgeland, so that also involves a bit of risk. If I then just take corruption in order to go for Barbarossa, but there's the danger of Barbarossa being discarded before my next turn. I draw the medieval army tactic, the Reign of Terror, and another aggression. Fjantarik builds a step of the Universitas. After that he makes an interesting choice, because he could just finish the Universitas here and get a big science boom going, but he is actually not finishing the Universitas in order to get 1 more activation out of Cleopatra, or then 1 more resource out of her at the next turn. Instead gets the food production going, which allows him to increase his population at the next turn and takes the reserves. So he basically gets 1 food and at the next turn 1 resource instead of 2 science and 1 culture. I think maybe I would have just finished the Universitas, especially because it means that he can already elect Nostradamus, maybe get a little bit more of information with him, and at the next turn potentially already see it and start getting a bit of culture going. So also being a bit better prepared for events like Raiders or Call to Arms. So I felt like maybe just finishing the Universitas could be more interesting, but like this he gets an additional resource out of Clio, which of course is also not bad. Now it's Gandin's turn, and he will go for Saladin, goes for the alchemy, goes for 2 upgrades, and then he sadly will indeed go for the Forbidden City, as I kinda expected, so that wonder won't be around for me. Now it's my turn. One downside of going for the monarchy, which I also thought about at the turn before, is that now I don't really have enough science to go for knights. I will get 1 more science with seeding with Confucius, 1 more science if I replace him, so I'm basically already in 4. But I thought that there is definitely hope that I still can go for knights and then use Barbarossa maybe to get a phalanx or medieval army tactic going at my next turn, because I know that there is knowledge of the ancients and 1 Confucius event in the deck. Sadly none of my opponents seeded, so now I was very curious to see whether 1 of those events is revealed, as otherwise it could be a bit tricky to get out of corruption nicely. I seed another Confucius event, an aggression into the deck, and sadly there's no science event revealed, instead a border conflict, which actually makes Gandin the strongest, and if he actually seeded the event into the deck, then of course it makes maybe sense that he went for the fourth warrior earlier on and revealed the fighting band tactic. So sadly I have to destroy something this turn, and but maybe hurts even more, sadly none of the science event were revealed, meaning that I don't have the chance to replace Confucius now with Barbarossa, take and develop the knights, and then maybe build one knight, get stronger, be better prepared for the event deck. Sadly that is now no longer an option. And the question is what else to do. There's one option, and that could be to just go for Barbarossa, take the swordsman, develop the swordsman, and then do a Barbarossa activation on the swordsman, and then be able to copy the legion tactic. So I definitely considered it, but I looked at how my situation after I have done this, and I just didn't like it too much. I am down to 0 science. Of course I will get a bit of science back, but I committed to swordsman. I know that at least 2 out of the 3 remaining, or actually all the 3 remaining events, the last one that isn't the science events is the Good Harvest, so I know that all of those events are no strength events, so building up some strength now and investing science into that just didn't feel too great for me. So I didn't want to reach out for swordsman for 2 civil actions, and instead I actually still went for Barbarossa and just build a warrior. I can still copy the legion tactic with 3 military actions from the monarchy. Hopefully that should be enough for a while to at least not be in danger of any aggression. And yeah, also one other reason why I was willing to wait for Barbarossa instead of maybe going for Joan of Arc is also the Good Harvest that I have knowledge about, because even with having spent that much food at the last turn, that should still allow me to hopefully go for 2 activations instead of only 1. Now it was the question on what to do with the turn if I don't want to go for knights or swordsmen. I said I could go for swordsmen, maybe be a bit better prepared for the military, but I just didn't like the look of it. I have a lot of resource production, but not the most science production, and I was fearing that Gandin has now already 6 civil actions. Sadly, it's very likely that a science event will be revealed before his turn, and he can go for some iron upgrades, gets the Forbidden City, will have lots of civil actions, can maybe go from government form in H2 and will then have even more civil actions. Fjantarik can maybe, with finishing the universities, go for an H2 government form relatively soon. So I felt like my opponents have better potential to build up a strong position in H2, and I felt a little bit worried about that, and at the end, because of that, I was willing to go for something that I maybe don't do that often, but I felt like in this situation maybe it's not too bad to do, especially because it gives me something to spend my actions on. I really didn't like it to maybe just take a bunch of cards here. I wanted to do something. I could potentially, of course, just take the irrigation, develop it, and build one. It could be an interesting choice, especially with the Good Harvest. I would get a bit of additional food with Barbarossa, maybe allowing to go for an additional activation, but if I don't go for any of those military techs, then I can at the moment only use those activations to get more warriors going, which is something that I don't really want to do. So that could be an interesting idea, but at the end I actually made a decision to, after copying the Legion tactic, go for a drama, build one, and then the question for the last civil action was, do I just want to build a second one immediately? I definitely want to build it very soon. Or do I instead want to build a farm? And at the end I made a decision to build a farm, because if the Good Harvest is revealed before I can build the second farm, then I don't have enough food to get another Barbarossa activation, while now I have 1 food, and then if I get another 2 from the Good Harvest, I will be 3 food, and if I lose the 2 yellow tokens before my next turn, that is still just enough to go for 1 more Barbarossa activation. So I was willing to rebuild this farm, and I also went for a drama. The next turn maybe already I can go for a second drama, and while I thought that maybe Gandin has a nice position to build up a very strong economy, at least the Forbidden City doesn't produce any culture, so maybe he will be already like 20 or 30 culture behind at the end of H2 potentially, if depending of course on whether he finds maybe some nice ways of getting some culture production going for himself. But I was hoping that while maybe with being stuck on 5 civil actions, having maybe some troubles to spend my resource effectively at the moment, not having the most science production, I was fearing that my economical situation will be a bit worse, but at least if I have a bit of a culture lead, that maybe gives me some leverage on still being fine if that should be the case. So no, that at the end was the turn that I came up with. Definitely some other options that could be fine, going for swordsman, irrigation, but I just didn't like the look of those options. I keep the phalanx tactic, the reign of terror, and the trade routes agreement. Fjantarik seeds, and there's indeed a good harvest revealed immediately, so I was happy that I rebuilt the farm so that I have now 3 food lying around. Fjantarik this turn will finish the Universitas, goes up to 4 science production, goes for 1 more farm upgrade. He of course got rewarded for going for this 1 farm in the sense that he got an additional food out of the good harvest. He then takes the rich land, goes for Nostradamus, and plays the reserves for resources. And with that has the potential to go for a coal upgrade, even if it is on 3 civil actions at the next turn. Gandin seeds, and the Confucius event is revealed. Sadly, that 1 science will allow him now to go for the iron, which I think is definitely a nice improvement for him. He could go for 3 upgrades, but instead he only goes for 2, so that he has enough resource around to finish the Forbidden City at the next turn, and then he will, with the last civil actions, take the drama and the irrigation. The drama I think makes a lot of sense. With having the Forbidden City, maybe the dramas could be enough to fix his happy faces for a while, and with being Bach, Gaudi, and also Shakespeare being there, he sets himself up to nicely transition into culture, which could be especially nice if he indeed manages to build up a very strong economy. Now it is my turn. I make the decision to not seed, as at the moment I am really not confident on whether I have the ability to not be the weakest, so I just pass on my politics phase, as I also didn't find a nice use case for the trade routes agreement. I have just enough food to get 1 more activation going, so I don't want to spend any food for resource, but I also don't need any resource for food. And this turn I then went for the alchemy. Of course it could be nice to maybe go for something like scientific methods directly, but I have to spend my civil action somehow, and at least with the Rome roads I will be in 5 science production during age 2, which is definitely not bad, and it just allows me to spend my actions efficiently. I can go for 2 alchemy upgrades and build another drama. Another reason for me to go for those dramas is of course also that there are some nice synergy for it in the game. There's Bach, there's Marlene, Gaudi, or Chaplin, Fleming, so with that I felt like it could be nice to maybe have those dramas already going. I will draw 3 cards: the popularization of science, promise of military protection, and the spy. Fjantarik seeds, the top event is the knowledge of the ancients, that was seeded by me. Fjantarik gets the most out of it at the end, at least Gandin only gains 1 resource. Fjantarik then has a bunch of science, wants to invest it somehow, and makes the decision to go for the masonry. That will save him 1 resource immediately with building the theology. Him being willing to build his theology worried me a little bit, because there could be some happy face related events coming, so I have to be careful, but at the moment I have no unhappy faces anyway, so hopefully I won't be in risk of getting hit by anything. Gandin will finish the Forbidden City this turn, takes the breakthrough, takes the rich land, and develops the drama already because he had a full hand. Going on to H2, we can take a quick look at the overview. Gandin, with having Saladin and Forbidden City and the Code of Laws, has lots of civil actions to work with, but the one thing that, now that I went for the dramas, he is lagging is the culture production, so he will fall behind in culture to me and Fjantarik. Also maybe doesn't have the most science saved up. Fjantarik has a lot of science saved up, is just waiting for an H2 government form. He's still in bronze mines, hoping to maybe get into coal quickly, but has his food and science production nicely covered, so if he gets into a government form and in coal mines, he should be in a very decent position. And I have nice resource and science production, so definitely not a bad position, especially because I also have some culture production going, but the 5 civil actions at some point could get a bit limiting, so maybe I shouldn't have gone for the monarchy earlier on, but if I would now be stuck on 4 civil actions, that could even be a bit more problematic, and at least I have the chance to maybe get a justice system or something at some point. Now it's my turn. I think I used my politics action in order to get some additional strength going. That was actually not to avoid being the weakest, because that I will achieve this turn anyway, because this turn I will actually go for the Ralphman and get stronger. I actually thought that if I get the Ralphman and 4 additional strength on top, then I might even have a chance to pull the spy off against Gandin, who only has 2 military actions at the next turn, so I thought it is worth a shot, even if it means that I produce a little bit less culture, to offer this pack to Fjantarik and maybe make myself quite a bit threatening, which could also cause Gandin maybe to just do could maybe force him to respond in an awkward way, instead of maybe just building his economy as he probably would prefer to do. Sadly, the pact is rejected. I will still go for the Rifleman. In order to get off Groove Corruption, I basically have to do a Barbarossa activation this turn, and just going for another warrior is a bit bad. There might definitely be some strength events coming. With it being that heavily committed to warriors, the Rifleman is just an extremely important technology. Fjantarik also would really like to have it. Gandin would also really like to have it. He has at least the Swordsman in hand as an alternative solution. So I thought a Rifleman are just too important, and I can do a Barbarossa activation immediately to build one going up to 8 strength, and then I was even willing to go for another upgrade, making myself completely the strongest. If I'm only at 8, I could still get hit by something like Call to Arms or Raiders when Fjantarik seeds. It's the question if it's really worth it, but maybe I want to do the upgrade relatively soon anyway, so I felt, even though it means missing out on a draw earlier, being prepared for even more events is also just not bad, and so I was willing to go for this second upgrade. Then the interesting question for me for my last civil action was, do I want to take the Engineering Genius or the Breakthrough? One other card to consider is definitely also the Organized Religion. Just having a Happy Face solution in hand might be fine, but at the moment I don't need any Happy Face solution, and if possible it could be nice to maybe go for the Team Sports as there is Pierre in the game. Gandin has already Forbidden City, Fjantarik the Theology, so hopefully the Happy Face solutions won't be too heavily contested. And now, the Breakthroughs may be the safer pick, as it gives me some value guaranteed at some point, unless I don't find a technology to develop for the whole of H2, but that's very unlikely, while the Engineering Genius is a bit more risky. I don't know for certain if I will get one of those H2 wonders, but there are definitely some interesting ones for me. Ocean Line, of course, Harvard College, but also the other ones could potentially be considered. And then the Engineering Genius could still be quite helpful to have to maybe build at wonder. For example, if I go for selective breedings, and then the Harvard College, that will take a lot of resources, and then saving the resource could be quite interesting. At the end I thought maybe it's just slightly better for me to go for the Breakthrough, but if I take the Breakthrough, then it means also that the Efficient upgrade will fall down to 1 instead of 2 civil actions for Fjantarik, and I really thought that could be a card that he would really like to have, with him still needing to go for coal, so he might take it at the end even anyway, or maybe it prevents him from taking it, and at the end that was the reason why I ended up going for Engineering Genius, as I thought it could have the potential to be a very nice card for myself. I thought maybe the Breakthrough is slightly better for myself, but at the end I wanted to let the Efficient upgrade stay on 2 civil actions for Fjantarik. I keep 2 events and a Spy in hand. I get a bit lucky here, draw the Classic Army tactic, just after having gone into Rifleman. Fjantarik gets his H2 government form, will now be at 8 civil actions, is willing to take the second copy of Rifleman for 3 civil actions. At least him having to spend 3 civil actions to take the Rifleman means that he can't that easily take some of those nice cards. He ends up taking the Scientific Method, which he maybe doesn't urgently need, but it could still be something nice to invest into. There will be an international trade agreement. Gandin will get additional resource, Fjantarik additional food. It's of course not great to see this pact between your opponents in a 3-player game that early in H2. Gandin goes for theater, also wants to get a bit of culture reduction going. Sadly there's Bach available, so my hopes of maybe getting a bit of a culture lead before towards the end of H2 is maybe now not the biggest hope any longer, because Gandin indeed, with having those dramas, will of course take Bach. The Breakthrough doesn't elect Bach for now, still wants to keep Saladin, which I think makes sense, but at some point can just go for Bach and then have a relatively or very efficient way of generating some culture. Now that I'm the strongest, I was willing to seed. I seeded a Reign of Terror. I was thinking, with me having the ability to go for 2 more upgrades to Rifleman, I hopefully have the good chances to not be the weakest. The Scientific Breakthrough is revealed. I actually get the most out of that, which is nice. And in this turn, as you can see, I was actually willing to take the Selective Breeding for 3 civil actions. I definitely could do some other stuff, especially I will not take the Cavalryman this turn, which is a bit risky, but at least I will let them stay on 2 civil actions for Fjantarik, but Gandin also doesn't have a cavalry tech, so it could be that those are taken away, and maybe I miss out on the opportunity to go for the Classic Army at some point. But again, with only having 5 civil actions, of course, taking something for 3 already at a turn, taking something for 3 is quite expensive, but sometimes when playing on lower civil actions it can still be better to maybe take something for expensive, which you at least need to do at some point anyway. At some point I want to get my farm upgrades going, instead of just taking a bunch of cards in hand, which would basically be the alternative for the turn. I could maybe take Revolutionary Deer, Frugality, maybe Cavalryman, but doing something like this just felt very, very awkward, and I just rather wanted to not have a full hand, not waste a lot of civil actions and taking a lot of those cards, and so I just went for the selective breeding, developed it, went for an upgrade. I know that the reds are not in the deck. I spent a little bit of science just in case that there maybe could be Dark Ages coming, but it is very unlikely with both of my opponents having that much science saved up. And so I think I generally like it. The only downside is that I am a bit at a risk of maybe missing out on Cavalryman and the opportunity to go for the classic army tactic. Getting the food production going as quickly as possible is also nice with having Barbarossa, makes it more likely that I can maybe get some more activations out if I have to keep him for a bit longer. Then I draw the Conquistadors tactic, so both the infantry cavalry tactics are drawn by me. Fjantarik Seeds, the historic territory, is revealed. I was willing to bid a Rifleman. It would have been a bit costly to win it, but at least I have another happy face and can a lot more easily go for an additional Barbarossa activation and relatively cheaply rebuild my units maybe soon. So at the end I was willing to bid the Rifleman for it, but I was thinking that maybe one of my opponents wins it, and at least then Gandin has to pay a little bit more. Fjantarik did just pass, so if I also would have just passed or bid one, then Gandin wouldn't have to send this one colonization card away. Fjantarik will now go for the scientific method. The coal is not on the row yet, so he just gets some other production going, then goes for more science. He goes for Maria Theresa, elects her immediately, can get some value out of her immediately with increasing his population, and also with him having low resources, it could be quite nice for him to get additional resource from her from the next turn on. He has a bunch of warriors, and in such a situation, and if you have Riflemen in hand, I think Maria can just be very easily used. You just develop the Rifleman, and each turn you upgrade one warrior to Rifleman for free. If you have the 3 resources, and then you also get of course a bit of science and culture with increasing your population, so I think Maria is a very nice choice here for him. And then he also takes the cannons and the opera, doesn't take the cavalryman, so I was hoping maybe if Gandin also doesn't take them, I could have a shot at getting them. And I was also happy to see that the second copy is actually revealed also as well, meaning I am now guaranteed to be able to get a cavalryman during my next turn. Gandin goes for the warfare, using the breakthrough, and has now more strength military actions, builds a warrior, is maybe afraid from potential strength events, takes sadly the Harvard College. It's definitely a wonder that I was eyeing towards, with me having taken this engineering genius. Could have helped me maybe getting into an H3 government form during H3, and at the end, sadly it is taken away by Gandin, who also of course can use it very nicely, can maybe wait for selective breeding instead of going for irrigation now and increase his science production along the way. He will then take this copy of Cavalryman, elects Bach, and then after that builds 2 stages in the Harvard College. With that he's maybe also prepared to just finish the Harvard College and take the ocean liner service, which also could still be very strong for him, and that's a big advantage of already building those 2 steps this turn. He's now starting to produce 5 culture per turn. I see the refugees into the deck, with getting now the cavalryman, with having some food production, allowing myself to maybe at the next turn get another Barbarossa activation going. I was willing to commit to this heavy strength event. Also Fjantarik has no longer Nostradamus, so at least he doesn't have knowledge that such a big event is coming, and with that I was willing to cede it instead of maybe ceding something safer like popularization of science. But popularization of science with Fjantarik maybe soon having 8 science production, and Gandin having the Harvard College would maybe also not be that great. The National Pride is maybe also not won by me, so at the end I was willing to risk the refugees. First of all, I will get out of corruption with going for another farm upgrade. At the next turn I have enough food to go for potentially even 2 Barbarossa activations. The problem being that after doing 1 I have an uprising issue. I could do 2, maybe using the second one to build a warrior and then just disband a warrior immediately, but it's also very military action heavy, or a big military action investment, and I think there's a nice alternative way on how to use Barbarossa nicely at the next turn. That is, of course, first of all, I will definitely take the cavalryman. I also will take the architecture, as I have a bunch of science, and I thought it could still be a nice card to have. Maybe allows me to finish one of those wonders more efficiently. And so I go for the frugality, because if I take that, then after increasing my population normally at the next turn, I have enough food left to still do one Barbarossa activation, which would not be the case if I increase my population without the frugality. I have now one civil action left. It could maybe be considered to just develop the architecture here, could maybe even allow me to take something like Ocean Liner Service if it should be available in the 2 civil action area. I would have to pay 3 civil actions to take it, and with having already the architecture developed, I could just finish it. But it would also a little bit of a commitment. At the end, I made a decision to actually take the urban growth here. I'm not sure, maybe it could be fine to just develop the architecture already, be a bit more civil action efficient. I might not need the urban growth in the near future. I very likely will find a nice way to use it at some point, but not maybe in the near future. And then maybe just having the architecture and then being able to just take and finish the ocean liner service, maybe take and finish the Suez Canal if I should maybe win a colony and draw one at my next turn, which is maybe not that likely, but a possibility. There's also a Gremlin available, but with me having no happy face solution, only those dramas as some sort of additional happy faces, I think that would be a bit too risky for me. Yeah, so the urban growth maybe could be fine. I have an easy way to make space in my hand with using the frugality or with just developing the architecture the next turn, but as I'm low in civil action anyway, and as I have maybe enough science to afford the architecture anyway, I think maybe I should have just developed it here, but of course maybe it could also have some advantage to just save up a lot of food to then go for an early age 3 government form, maybe leave myself open for something like strategy and go for a bit more of a military push. I do think that was maybe actually my main thought behind not developing it. I have this classic army tactic, the cavalryman, and if I should get a strategy, then maybe it could be nice to go into a more military heavy direction, and then maybe I don't need the architecture as much, and it could be better to not have the science spent on it. I keep an aggression, the tactic, and the popularization of science. I draw a colony and the economic progress. Fjantarik this turn, thanks to the rich land, can go for 1 upgrade to coal, and thanks to having the Rifleman, he can start using the additional resources from Maria Theresa. He then takes the rich land, the reserves, and also the patriotism, which is a very important card for him with being stuck on 2 military actions and maybe hoping towards getting the strategy at some point. Gandin goes for the constitutional monarchy this turn, gets now a big civil action boost, finishes or takes the cannons, the selective breeding, and then finishes the Harvard College, develops the swordsman. He has missed out on the rifleman and maybe wants to be prepared to go for some H2 tactics, and at the next turn can maybe start going for selective breeding, and with the efficient upgrade he can do 2 upgrades and get a bunch of food production going. With those upgrades he also makes sure to not be the weakest, so he maybe has seeded some strength events, because already the turn before he made sure to not be the weakest, so that could be an indicator that there's something coming, or he's just afraid of what I and Fjantarik have seeded. And now it is my turn. I'm still the strongest, and I made a decision to push the popularization of science. I was a bit worried pushing the economic progress, as Fjantarik will have coal production going. Gandin has at least the additional resource from the international trade agreements, so I didn't really want to commit to this, especially because I think the economic progress, if it at the end results in relatively equal value, is maybe more valuable to those players who have a lot of civil actions, as those a lot easier can invest those resources into additional food very nicely, while for me it could maybe even cause some corruption issues. I also didn't want to commit to the colony without having any colonization cards in hand, so at the end, despite maybe the popularization of science being slightly better for my opponents, I was willing to cede it, but the leader that I will be going for this turn will be Nobel, so with that it hopefully should be at least somewhat neutral. The raiders are revealed, which is nice, so I don't get hit by that. I then indeed use the frugality, make space in my hand. There are 2 leaders in the row this turn. If I don't go for any of them, then there's only Anthony Gaudi left, which maybe could be a fine leader to have, but I don't get a civil action back when replacing Barbarossa, and now I can get a value out of a leader like Nobel or Newton already this turn. Despite only having alchemies, I do think Newton could be considered. He saves me a bunch of civil actions, gives the civil action back when he will get replaced in age 3. It's a bit annoying though, because in order to use Barbarossa to build a cavalryman, of course I have to develop the cavalryman before I have Newton, so I can't save the civil action on that. And also the 2 additional strength from Nobel, with me maybe leaning into, or at least with me having the possibility to go for a bit of some pressure with my strength, the 2 additional strength could be nice, and Nobel just gives me 1 more science production, and with that I felt Nobel is better here, but Newton, despite only having alchemies, could still be considered as additional civil actions, could end up being very important for me. And now I have Nobel, who doesn't get the civil action back during age 3, and with being that low on civil actions, that can definitely be a very limiting factor, so maybe Newton could be interesting. At the end I made the decision to go for Nobel here. I also really wanted to get this justice system, as going up to 6 civil actions is quite important instead of going into age 3 with being stuck on 5. There's a little bit of an issue, and that is that I want to do a Barbarossa activation, as this is a lot of value, before switching to Nobel. In order to do that, I need to, first of all, in order to even be able to take either Nobel or Justice System, I had to make space in my hand with using the Frugality, and I also have to use that before doing the Barbarossa activation. I do not have an uprising issue, so I used Frugality. Now I have to develop the Cavalryman, and then I don't have the ability to both take and elect Nobel and take and develop the justice system, which is a bit annoying, and then it was a tough decision for me if I should actually still take the justice system. So I will develop the Cavalryman, I will do 1 last Barbarossa activation, it's the last turn in H2, so I have to replace him now, go for Nobel, going up to 15 strength, and then, as you can see, I made the decision to actually not go for the justice system and instead develop the architecture. Maybe a little bit questionable, it could get punished, but maybe I can hope towards getting H3 government form at some point, and one reason why I thought it could be important to already have spent the civil action on developing the architecture is that at the next turn, with losing the 2 yellow tokens to the end of the age, I will have an uprising issue, and the architecture will help me for all ways how I want to fix it. There are still 2 happy face solutions left, 1 copy of organized religion, 1 copy of team sport, so if I build any of those, then I can immediately save 2 resources with the architecture. However, if those get denied, or maybe I don't want to go for them, then there's one other option on how to fix my uprising issue, and that is to go for the ocean liner service. And then with having the architecture developed, even if it should stay on this amount of civil actions, I can take it and finish it immediately, and just with that I think it could be important to have already the architecture lying around, as if I still have it in hand with me having only 5 civil actions, it could be a bit tricky to fix my uprising issue and get the architecture going. So I, at the end, made the decision to commit to that, and instead of taking the justice system, maybe hoping to either get an H3 government form soon, or maybe the civil service in H3. The Oceanliner service will stay on 3 civil actions for Fjantarik. I thought maybe we'll still go for it anyway, with having Maria Theresa, but it's at least a bit costly, and Gandin has selective breeding in hand, might also still go for the Oceanliner service, but has an efficient upgrade that he can nicely use in the selective breeding. I keep 1 aggression, 1 event and a tactic in hand. I draw another aggression and a colonization card. Fjantarik goes for the cannons, uses Maria's resource, also the patriotism to build a cannon, goes for an upgrade to Rifleman, maybe doesn't have the most defense cards and wants to be safe from an aggression, goes for an upgrade to Cole. He could now still grab the Ocean Liner, but interestingly he makes the decision to go for the Eiffel Tower here. And I mean, the Eiffel Tower can be a wonder that is maybe still fine if you finish it in early H3. The Oceanliner serves relatively late anyway. On the other hand, with Maria Theresa, the Oceanliner serves very strong. However, the 2 additional civil action that you would spend to take it here can now be spent on taking some very strong yellow cards. So with that, I think it's a fine decision to not go for the Oceanliner service here. It's a bit questionable maybe still to go for the Eiffel Tower, because it will at least take 2 turns until it will be finished, and then it's already a little bit late, but happy face, at least it looks like it will be relevant, so that makes the Eiffel Tower better, and the cult reduction might still also be nice to have. So if maybe there's not the most exciting way to spend all of the civil actions this turn, I still think the Eiffel Tower can be a solid grab here, and then Fjantarik just takes the breakthrough and the efficient upgrade. Gandin makes an interesting decision here, has the selective breeding in hand, but develops the irrigation. The reason for that being that he actually wants to go for the ocean liner service this turn, and then he maybe just needs his farm upgrades to prevent famine, not to really produce him any food, even though maybe with the red cross producing some additional food could still be nice. But the irrigation is cheaper in science, cheaper to go for those upgrades, so with having the ocean liner service, it's maybe just a better technology to have actually, and despite having the selective breeding in hand, he develops the irrigation here, takes the ocean liner, takes the engineering genius that he can nicely use in the ocean liner service, and not only at the next turn, but even immediately with having the Harvard College, and then he goes for an upgrade to be a bit stronger. Maybe he also just wants to be safe from an aggression. Now he's guaranteed to be safe, even if he should have no defense card available. Now it is my turn, I am the strongest, I kinda maybe want to move the deck forward, especially because the next event is the Reign of Terror, and when we take a look at Gandin Civilization, he has no free population. The Reign of Terror, I think, was still seen by Nostradamus, so Fjantarik knows that if he pushes, Gandin will lose a population and has to destroy something during his turn. And despite me not liking the economic progress in the deck too much, especially now with Fjantarik having taken the Eiffel Tower, it might really help him and justify his action to take it. So I didn't like it and still didn't like it too much to have it in the deck, but I kind of wanted to get the Reign of Terror out quickly, the refugees out quickly, now that at the moment I'm still somewhat fine in strength. So at the end I was willing to push here, and I think I also had knowledge about the top event of the deck, if I remembered correctly. Yes, it's one of my Confucius events. And this turn I have to think about how do I want to fix my uprising issues. Basically I have two options, the organized religion for one civil action or the team sports for two civil actions. And then there was also one card that I really needed to consider this turn, and that is the strategy, which is nice to have for myself, but also a very important card maybe to deny from Fjantarik, to maybe make it that he's stuck on two military actions at least for a little bit longer. But it's not that easy to take it. I could develop the organized religion, build one, maybe go for an upgrade to Rifleman and then take the strategy in hand, or maybe even disband a warrior, build a cavalryman, reveal the tactic, and be a bit threatening with the amount of military that I'm having and then take the strategy. But it felt a bit expensive. There might be military theories relatively soon available anyway, which might be better for myself. Investing 8 science into the strategy makes it harder for me to go for an H3 government farm. So at the end I was willing to give this card to Fjantarik, but also was not really happy about it, because I think it makes it really a lot easier for him to be fine, especially because I considered even more, because I wanted to go for a turn where I revealed a classic army tactic. This turn I have those aggressions in hand and thought maybe there's a chance that I can pull one of those off at the next turn. And the first turn that I tried out was going for team sports, building one, increasing my population, building a cavalryman, and that will give me a lot of strength. And then I thought, oh, I could really have a chance to pull those aggressions off. But then, if Fjantarik gets the strategy, probably he can defend. And I thought, can I somehow deny the strategy and still go for this? Thought about going for the organized religion, developing it, building one, disbanding a warrior, going for cavalryman, revealing the tactic. But with losing the warrior and the strength from the arenas, I don't have as much strength. And so at the end I just went for the arenas. There's also Pierre in the game, which could be a very interesting leader to have, and so I was at the end fine with giving the strategy to Fjantarik, went for the arenas, built one, and build a cavalryman, reveal the tactic, going up to 26 strength, sadly missing out on some early H3 draws, but at least I'm putting some pressure on my opponents, maybe force the actions a little bit, and if they don't respond I have some aggressions in hand that I can maybe try out and see if they don't have enough defense cards in hand. I draw only one card. I do maybe get a bit lucky. I draw a playable event, the Impact of Happiness. I have those team sports now. Gandin actually has the Forbidden City, so there's the potential that it could even turn out to be quite a strong event for me, so I was happy about this draw. Fjantarik seeds and opens the Reign of Terror, so Gandin gets hit by that. He will this turn go for the strategy, develops it, that of course also will give him additional draws immediately, builds an additional cannon, and then doesn't reveal a tactic. Which maybe he doesn't have a tactic available, but if he, for example, has something like defensive army, there's an argument, if he can defend himself, has a defense card, that it could be viable for him to maybe on purpose not reveal it, because that means he gets one more draw earlier and also gets guaranteed 3 additional resources from a rear tree side the next turn. He then also takes the tanks, maybe wants to be better prepared for H3 tactics, and also the Engineering Genius, which will help him to finish the Eiffel Tower quickly. Now it's Gandin's turn. He will finish the Ocean Liner service and then gets the first copy of Air Force, has just enough resource to build one. With that is at 14 strength and then takes the Wave of Nationalism. Is actually willing to copy the Legion tactic at the cost of a draw, and he was at the Fighting Band tactic before. That definitely was a bit of an indicator for me that maybe he has the 2 defense cards that he needs to defend himself in hand, because before that he was in 14 strength, 2 H2 defense cards wouldn't have been enough to defend himself. Now he would be able to defend himself with 2 H2 defense cards, so maybe it's just a bluff, but maybe, and of course even if it's a bluff, it's still nice to get a bit stronger, but maybe it's just the amount of strength that he needs to defend himself, and with that and with me having an alternative in order to going for an aggression. If I would have just aggressions, I think I would have just tried it against one of my opponents, even though it meant missing out on another draw. But now that I have the Impact of Happiness in hand, and now that there are also still the refugees coming, which would be very nice to win, Gandin again would have to destroy something. He lost a warrior to the population loss of the Reign of Terror, and with that I didn't try out an aggression and instead went for the Impact of Happiness. So I will cede. And I was happy to see that the refugees are revealed immediately. That's very nice for me, I think. Having a free population will help me a lot to get out of corruption, gives me some options that I otherwise wouldn't have, and Gandin will immediately get hit by losing another population and also some culture. So with losing both of those events, he definitely maybe gets a bit distracted from just doing the stuff that he wants to do, also with the strength push. So despite having Bach, he is still behind in culture at the moment. I, thanks to the Rome roads, am now also at 6 science culture production, but I still am sitting on those 4-5 civil actions, so that could be a bit of a limiting factor, but there's the democracy coming down the road. Maybe I will be able to fix my action soon. I even thought about maybe taking the democracy even for 3, but I do think that would be a bit expensive, especially because I do think I have some hope to maybe get a democracy at the next turn, as maybe it's not the most important cards to my opponents. This turn I go for something expensive, but I thought maybe that just gives me some very viable things. I actually am willing to take the multimedia here for 3 and build one. That gets me out of corruption. Increases my science and my culture production. I'm now at 9 culture production. I was hoping that I maybe can pull a little bit away with the culture. Sadly, I don't have a free civil action to take Flaming and maybe also movies. That of course would be very nice, but now we can see that it is somewhat limiting to be on 5 civil actions. Maybe I could have also gone for movies, developed one, built one, take Flaming in hand. But if I then maybe also replace Nobel quickly, I'm very low on science. Going into an H3 government form like the democracy is quite difficult. And also, the library might give me even more culture than maybe at least short term than going for just a movie, because there's still the popularization of science coming, meaning that building this multimedia might give me 6 culture instead of only 3, and then also the additional science, making it more easily possible to maybe in 2 turns go for something like democracy while still having enough science left for the remaining turns of the game. So while I could have gone for cheaper movies and then maybe could have grabbed something like one of those yellow cards or maybe Flaming with my remaining civil action, I here, especially with the popularization of science coming, was willing to take the multimedia, setting myself up at 9 science production. If there will be Nobel Prizes, that could also be nice to have some additional science. There's not the most synergy for it after Flaming is gone. No Einstein, no Steve Jobs to maybe at least spend a science. So I was not 100% sure about this move, but I felt like it could be very viable. And if I then I'm able to go for democracy soon, and then I thought maybe I can stay a little bit ahead with my culture compared to the opponents. I draw some cards, a war, a military alliance, and the impact of competition, which at the moment would be the strongest for myself. Fjantarik seeds and the popularization of science is indeed revealed immediately, so very nice timing for me. I get 9 additional culture out of it. Fjantarik will this turn with the Engineering Genius be able to finish the Eiffel Tower, thanks to Maria will be able to upgrade a warrior to Rifleman, takes the mechanized agriculture, the urban growth, the patriotism, and the revolutionary idea, still gets 3 draws going. Now it's Gandin's turn. He again loses a military unit to the population loss that he had to suffer. He then plays the wave of nationalism, which at least allows him to relatively nicely build up some new units. He builds one cavalryman, which is not really giving him that much strength, but there's one way how he can now get a lot of strength going, and that is with Marlene Dietrich. At the moment he is at 13 strength, but with just electing Marlene he will now be at 29, because with already having committed to an air force the turn before, being able to fulfill the tactic or not just results in 16 additional strength. So I think here we have a situation where Marlene is just insanely strong, and Gandin is willing to go for her immediately, makes him, instead of being very weak and maybe in danger of an aggression, out of the sudden he's now the strongest. The happy faces might also still be relevant at some point. There will be the effect of happiness coming, so those definitely will be viable or valuable, and then he misses out on a bit of culture reduction compared to Bach, but I think it helps him a lot with the military here. After that he has 3 civil actions left, and he goes for one farm upgrade, takes the military build-up and the rockets, maybe being prepared also for some H3 tactics. He has already the cannons in hand, but maybe with the military build-up he felt like being able to invest into units that give him more strength, even though they are more costly, could be viable. Now it's my turn. The impact of competition is actually looking quite nice at the moment, so I thought about if I maybe want to just seed it. But Fjantarik has a lot of yellow cards in hand, has Maria Theresa to build some additional units. Gandin has this military build-up in hand. I just was fearing that they have the potential to just build up a lot of units if they want to, and I didn't want to commit to this impact of competition. Instead I just offered this military alliance. I was a bit unsure about which player should I try to offer it to. At the end I went with Gandin. I thought both Fjantarik and Gandin have some military potential. At the end I don't remember my exact reasons. I think I also was completely unsure which player I should choose in the situation. Of course, now that we are both stronger, Fjantarik can more easily get additional resource out of Maria. That could be an argument of maybe offering it to him, but now at least it also is more difficult for him to get stronger, and maybe he's afraid of some strength events. So at the end I just offered it to Gandin. And in this turn it was relatively clear for me that I should go for the Manhattan project here. I have at least 9 science production thanks to having gone for the multimedia, and I was a bit worried about the strength potential that my opponents could be having. Fjantarik has the tanks in hand. If he has drawn a fitting tactic, could definitely have some potential, and also Gandin, if he has the right tactic, could have a lot of potential, especially because he has already the air forces, has the military build up to maybe generate a lot of additional resources. And especially if I should miss out on air forces, I could be a bit in trouble with my strength. I don't have the most population left any longer in a situation where you maybe don't have air forces, not the most population. The Manhattan project, especially with having a very decent amount of science, I think is just a very solid wonder. I can take it relatively cheaply. And if I finish it soon, I thought maybe I will already finish it at the next turn, depending on what options will be available. Then I thought maybe there's still the option to potentially, if I don't increase my population this turn, which I will end up doing, maybe being able to go for the Red Cross at some point, with me having the architecture and also with me getting more civil actions, maybe, hopefully soon, with taking the democracy in hand this turn. So I go for the Manhattan project, I go for the democracy. I also definitely wanted to take this reserves for one civil action, which could be very important to have the additional resources, but also in case I indeed will end up going for the Red Cross, could be played for food. And then it was a difficult question on how to use the last civil action. Of course, one thing to consider instead of taking maybe reserves could be to just take the military theory, as that also could be a very important card for my military situation. But I, at the end, rather wanted to have the reserves plus one of those cards instead of just having the military theory. There is at least another copy. Fjantarik has already committed to the strategy, and Gandin already the warfare. Of course, military theory can still be a nice upgrade to the warfare, but there's at least a chance that I will still get the military theory. And now the question was basically, do I want to take the fundamentalism or the satellites? Of course, it's a bit awkward to take both fundamentalism and democracy in hand, but it also means that I keep myself a bit more flexible if I either have to defend myself from potential military pushes, or if I maybe have the chance to pull a military push off myself, then the fundamentalism could still be nice to have as an alternative, but that was not the main reason why I wanted to take the fundamentalism or why I considered it. The main reason was that I was a bit afraid of Fjantarik's military potential, as I said. If he has a nice tactic and goes for the fundamentalism, he definitely could be very threatening, and I thought maybe I have to remove it here from him and remove some peaceful options. But at least he doesn't have air forces for now, maybe he doesn't have the right cards drawn. And so at the end I actually didn't go for the fundamentalism. Also it gives him fast food chains for 1 civil action cheaper, which could give him the opportunity to take maybe the best wonder that is available for him, unless he can save up a lot of food for the Red Cross. So I also found it a bit annoying that maybe I remove a military option from him, but I just make the peaceful option for him better. And at the end, I just didn't take it in hope that Fjantarik doesn't go for a big military push, but especially if I should miss out on the air forces, I don't maybe have done a best response to it, even now with taking the Manhattan project. So maybe I should take it to be a bit more safe, but at the end I took the satellites, as that is a card that I can play on top of the democracy, as I really like to go for the democracy at the next turn. So it might be nice to keep the options open, but I really was hoping that I can just go for the democracy, and then the satellites also gives me a way to maybe get some additional strength, will be nice for some impacts. And so I took the strategy, the satellites here. I didn't increase my population, because I wanted to save up some food from now on to maybe be prepared for the Red Cross potentially. I could not just take corruption, I would still have enough resource to finish the Manhattan project even without playing the reserves for resources, which could be nice. But I at the end made a decision that despite it is very costly with me missing out on 2 draws, I went for both of those upgrades to get out of corruption. I don't have the most resources, I might need those upgrades still if I go for a second army at some point, and with me not having the most resources, I do think those additional resources are important, and it could be that me getting out of corruption and going for those upgrades will actually not only result in 2, but even 4 additional resources, because if you remember, one of the remaining events that is still coming is the economic progress, and if I just don't go for any of those upgrades, I would only get 2 additional resources out of the economic progress, and I would have corruption, and now I don't have corruption, and if I remembered correctly, I will now get 4 additional resources out of the economic progress. Maybe, no, I think I would have just gotten 2 if I did my calculations correctly. I draw potentially interesting impact here with the impact of science, but Gandin can go for another lab upgrade. Gandin has the Harvard College, can easily go for computers or multimedia, so we'll have to see if I will end up being able to play it, especially because I at some point will also lose the 2 science production from Nobel, but it's nice to maybe have as a potential strong option. Fjantarik goes for some food upgrades, goes for Churchill, increases population one more time with Maria, and he indeed will do something with his military. Will he take the fundamentalism? I was a bit worried about it. He builds a tank, and he doesn't take the fundamentalism because the air forces are on the row, which is maybe the even more important card for him to have. He has at least a patriotism, so even without a fundamentalism, he maybe has the potential to go for a war. And I was really afraid that maybe he has the modern army tactic and some very big strength potential. However, as we can see, he this turn revealed a mechanized army tactic. He is willing to miss out on a draw in it, so I do think that's definitely a very, very clear sign that he has no modern army tactic, and I don't think there's any chance that he wants to play a trick on me and Gandin here, or doesn't want to reveal it or something, even though I definitely could maybe use it if I get the last copy of Rockets. So at least he likely doesn't have the tactic, will now only get 2 draws, so I was a bit more relieved and was hoping that with that I can defend against push with the mechanized army tactic, with me having the Manhattan project and the ability to go for a second army soon. Fjantarik with building the military will now be the strongest, didn't go for the fast food chains. Gandin will now go for the modern infantry. The bad news is of course for me also that I'm the player who missed out on air forces, which can always be a bit threatening. Gandin will go for the modern infantry, builds one, upgrades his remaining swordsman to modern infantry, takes the revolutionary idea on the efficient upgrade, and I was now even more worried about Gandin than Fjantarik, because he definitely put a lot of investment into his military, just takes revolutionary and efficient upgrade, doesn't take the military theory instead of the efficient upgrade. With that I was hoping that maybe he doesn't have big military plans yet. But if he has something like modern army with him having cannons and rockets in hand, he also could be very, very threatening, and I was quite afraid of it, but at least he didn't take the military theory here, which could be an indicator that maybe it was just for defensive purposes, but he used a lot of military actions purposely, on purpose missed out on a draw. The last upgrade was not really necessary, so it felt like he goes for a bit of a commitment towards the military here. Maybe he also did some calculations and figured that he really needed this resource from the efficient upgrade to maybe go for this farm upgrade, but at the moment he doesn't have any famine issues anyway. Now it is my turn. I am the weakest, and both the impact of competition with my opponents having started building some military and impact of science are definitely no safe impact, so I just passed my politics phase here. And I also don't have a pact that I need to cancel. No, definitely not. This turn I go for the democracy. It's a bit risky maybe to invest the science into it, but I can't really go for air forces now any longer anyway. I still have enough science to go for something like military theory at the next turn in case I need it. I have enough to go for satellites, I have enough to go for rockets and military theory in 2 turns, so I just wanted to get the democracy going, the additional actions and the additional culture production. And then is the question of what to do. I thought about something like going for Mandela. I can increase my population, get an unhappy worker, take Mandela very cheaply, but I dropped down in strength, I don't get as much culture out of him, and so I didn't like it too much, especially because I still felt like maybe the Red Cross could be a very interesting wonder for me. Of course, it looks like some military threat is building up here, and maybe I shouldn't think about options like a Red Cross, but on the other hand, with air forces gone, I maybe don't have nice ways to defend myself very nicely anyway, and maybe just scoring some more peaceful culture, and then maybe having that much of a culture gap to still be not too much behind, or maybe even in front of the opponents after having lost to a war, could be a way on how to respond to a potential military push of one of my opponents. And so with not wanting to spend any food, the only way to get out of corruption nicely is to play the reserves and finish the Manhattan Project, and the strength is also of course important, as at the moment I'm not able to defend against an aggression. So I play the reserves, if I find the right button, here. I play the reserves, finish the Manhattan Project for 9 culture, that's at least a somewhat solid amount, together with the strength, and then I have 4 civil actions left, and as you can see I just took the revolutionary idea. I thought about the civil service, but if I might need to go for military theory and rockets, then I might not have the science to develop it anyway. I have also the satellites in hand, and I felt like the revolutionary idea could still be important. Could maybe allow myself to go for military theory, rockets and satellites to maybe set up as nice of a defense as possible. And then I also went for the computers. It's a cheap technology, maybe there will still be Nobel Prizes, but also mainly with having the impact of science in hand, the abilities to upgrade those labs could potentially be very important for me. Sadly, with having committed a reserves resource, but it's also the only way to finish the Manhattan Project, I don't have enough food to just take and finish the Red Cross, which would be nice, but there's still a nice chance that I can do it anyway, because there's the economic progress, which would give me enough food to take and finish it in case it is revealed. At the end of my turn, I draw 2 pacts in the Armed Intervention, maybe not the ideal draw, the international tourism could be fine, but it would also mean that the military alliance would get cancelled, and also I guess my opponents have more wonders than me, but might still be willing to accept a pact, so it could potentially be a nice way to spend my politics action. Now it's Fjantarik's turn, the second copy of military theory is revealed, and as you can see also the Red Cross is coming down the row. Fjantarik opens the arms industry, which sadly doesn't give me any resources. Fjantarik gets the most out of it. He will use Churchill, develops the air forces, builds one, is now at 49 strength. I was a bit relieved to see him disbanding a warrior, going for the opera. It seems like he definitely hasn't drawn the modern army tactic in the meantime, goes for farm upgrades to just makes sure that he can defend himself nicely while preparing for some culture generation and impact preparation, or doing some, not preparing for those things. So I kind of read this turn as him just defending himself and doing some other stuff instead of having any military ambitions for his own, because even if he has the modern army tactic now, or even if he draws it now, he can reveal it, but after that he has only one military action, or no military action left, one with the patriotism, so he can't fulfill a second modern army tactic. And with that I hopefully should be able to defend against a potential war from Fjantarik. He also upgrades one more lab, so is willing to spend quite a bunch of resources, but maybe also knows that unless Gandin has knowledge about both modern army tactics, he always, in case he will go for some more military now, has to consider that Fjantarik could have a copy. Fjantarik will then take the civil service as his last civil action. Gandin will use the ocean liner service to increase his population, uses the efficient upgrade that he took earlier, destroys a mine. I was somewhat worried what I had just witnessed when I saw the turn. Military buildup is played, revolutionary radio is played, the rockets are played, one rocket is built, another air force is built, putting himself at 53 strength. He takes the military theory away from me, so I don't have the option to go for that technology any longer, and he also takes the endowment at the moment. He is still lowest in culture, despite having had Bach and Marlene, but he never have found a time to build more dramas, maybe because of those population losses especially. And with that he now committed to a more military heavy route, and I was definitely worried because he has some very big strength potential. If he has the modern army tactic, he at the next turn can declare war, develop military theory, build a cavalryman, and one modern infantry, and or if the economic progress is real before his turn, even a modern infantry and a rocket, then he would have two modern army tactics with air forces and would be at around 100 strength, and that is definitely an amount of strength that I cannot match, I cannot even get near that amount of strength. So if he has a war, it's definitely looking very, very threatening. I was very afraid of what will maybe be happening at his next turn. One hope that I can be having, of course, though, it wasn't my biggest hope, but he makes it that he will draw 3 cards at the end of his turn. Maybe he also makes this turn as basically playing to his outs. Maybe he doesn't have a war in hand yet and is actually just willing to commit to this, to, if he has maybe just a tactic, to have a good shot to potentially win the game, or at least overtake me with declaring a war against me, if he should draw a war. But I didn't have that much hope that it is actually the case, because the turn before, if you remember, he missed out on a draw, and if he was already somewhat setting up for war, then he should have made sure to draw 3 cards, and with that I was fearing that he has a war in hand and that he will declare that the next turn, and very likely against me, because Fjantarik could maybe just threaten a modern army tactic. And also I'm the one who has the culture lead. And the question is, how do I want to prepare towards that war? And I could probably prepare a little bit more strength than I will be doing this turn, but I can just go for 2 more cavalrymen. I can't go for a third tactic. I could of course take rockets and threaten the modern army tactic, but in this case threatening it is not really doing that much, because even with threatening it, I might still just be the best war target, and if I don't have it, I just invest a lot of things into nothing. I could play a turn where I defend a little bit more, but I felt like my biggest out here is just to indeed make my culture lead as big that even if I get hit by a very big war, I could maybe still have an amount of culture that could allow myself to not finish last, or maybe even still win the game potentially. But in order to achieve that culture lead, I need to push now, which is a bit of a commitment. The impact of science is very much far from being a safe impact. At least I have those computers in hand to help me with that. And I need to see it because the economic progress is on top, and I want to get additional food to be able to just take and finish the Red Cross, as that will give me a quite big amount of culture. Sadly there's only 1 colony, so it's only 31, but I will then have a very big amount of culture, as we will see, and even if I get hit by a big war, I thought maybe I still have some chances to not finish last, and also I, as said, can't really do that much more than building a second army, going for satellites, maybe an additional arena or something anyway. So I open the economic progress, Fjantarik gets the most out of it, I at least get a bit more out of it than Gandin, and then I will indeed just take the Red Cross, finish it. Now I will be at 140 culture after my turn, and the last civil action was also a relatively clear one for me. I took the urban growth, and with that I had a very clear plan for the next turn. At the next turn I can develop the satellites, I can destroy literally all of my mines, or maybe also one farm, depending on how I want to prepare for impacts. Also on no lab, because the impact of science is coming, so I can get 3 population for 3 civil actions, then I still have 3 left. I can build 2 cavalrymen, I can use my 3rd last civil action to build a team sports. After that I have still 2 left, and thanks to the 2 civil actions and the urban growth, I could then still develop the computers, go for an upgrade, making sure that even after losing Nobel, I still, at least for the moment, have the most science production, and maybe if the timing is right, I could win the impact of science. If I wouldn't have had to commit to the impact of science, maybe I could have taken something like professional sports instead, which could maybe make it that I have a bit more strength potential instead of just building the arena. But I really wanted to push. The impact of competition at this point is not looking that great if Gandin just builds even more strong unit, and also Fjantarik has already built up quite a bunch of military. So I kind of needed to commit to the impact of science, and then I also wanted to figure out a turn for the next turn that can allow myself to at least have chances to win that impact. And I actually still had quite a bit of hope here, because I will now be at 140 culture, so I'm somewhat like 90 culture ahead of Gandin, but also my production at the last turn will again be bigger than Gandin's production that he will be having. So I am already quite a bit in the lead. Gandin's war will still will be something like not a complete 100 culture swing, but something like between 90 and 100 culture. So then he has only closed the gap. However, the impact of happiness that I've seen and the impact of science at least have the potential, especially with me building an additional arena at the next turn, to be quite strong against Gandin. And maybe I was hoping there could still be some hope, but Gandin has also the endowment in hand, could maybe play an aggression, so in case a war should be happening, there are many ways how I could just get hit by too many things, but if I maybe can pull off those nice impacts, then I was hoping that I am at this point maybe have that much of a culture lead that I can actually get hit by a big war and still have hopes to not finish last, especially now that I draw another nice impact, the impact of architecture, especially with me having the plan to go for one computer upgrade and also for another arena at the next turn. Could be another very big impact against Gandin. I was very happy to draw it, and I definitely thought it might maybe still be enough, even if Gandin goes for this big war. Fjantarik Seeds, I was thankful that there was no big annoying strength event revealed, instead of vast territory, which all players pass on. Fjantarik really does need the food, and both I and Gandin need all of our military units in order to be prepared for this potential war. Fjantarik uses Churchill, of course he also sees the potential that Gandin will be having. He builds an air force, plays the reserves, plays the patriotism, builds a cannon. It's interesting that he doesn't build the tanks. Maybe he needs the amount of resources to do some specific things to the next turn, but building a tank would leave himself more open to modern army and maybe make him even safer, but maybe he figured he's safe enough anyway, and he can still build a tank and a rifleman at the next turn in case he has the modern army, so he is still threatening a lot of strength. And then he takes the reserves and the professional sports. Now it is Gandin's turn, and I was of course very interested to see if he indeed will have a war or not. I still had some very small hopes that maybe he doesn't have one and just played to his outs, but it really didn't look like at 2 turns ago, and so with that he has indeed war available. And now, of course, I was very afraid to see what he will be doing. Of course, I basically could already calculate it before he first of all plays the endowment, uses the chance to play that card for 6 culture, which maybe he won't be able to do any longer at the following turns. He is willing to destroy another mine, builds rocket, builds modern infantry, reveals the modern army tactic. The military alliance got cancelled, otherwise he would even be at 103 strength now, but he is still at a very high amount, 100 in strength, and I was definitely not happy about it, but with all of those impacts I still had some hope. Then it's my turn, the last turn of me, and Gandin of course isn't finished with his turn yet. He takes some cards, professional sports, computers, and efficient upgrade. Now it's my turn, and the first thing that I definitely have to do is to play the impact of architecture. That impact is just way too strong against Gandin, also fine against Fjantarik, so I just have to seed it, even though there could be some annoying H2 events revealed. I seeded it, And there was a surprising event revealed that I was not too happy to see. Surprising in that sense that both of those H2 events were actually seeded by Fjantarik, and the event that is revealed is the terrorism. But Fjantarik does actually not have the least culture, Gandin has the least culture, and he will be able to destroy some buildings during his turn, and I was very unhappy to see this, because that makes it very just less likely that I can actually win Impact of Science, that I maybe get a nice amount of Impact of Happiness. My best bet maybe is to hope that both of those impacts are actually revealed before my next turn. That maybe could be nice, but otherwise Gandin can sabotage those impacts for me with destroying a building now with the terrorism, and also get some guaranteed value with the impact of architecture. So I was really unhappy to see this event. Maybe I probably would have preferred a strength event instead of the terrorism, and yeah, I was a bit surprised by it, because it was actually seeded by Fjantarik, who maybe seeded it early on at a point where it looked like maybe he could have had chances to have the lowest culture, or he just was in a position where he really needed to push at some point. But I definitely was surprised by this, and also a bit unhappy. I will now develop the satellites for 3 additional strength, and then just do the turn as planned. I will destroy 2 mines. For the last disband, it's the question, do I want to disband a farm, do I want to disband my last mine? I have knowledge about impact of industry. Disbanding the mine basically costs me 4 points for impact of balance. Disbanding the farm costs me 7 points for impact of agriculture. Both of those impacts could definitely be in there. Impact of agriculture could at least be a somewhat good one against Gandin, and maybe I have to hope for some nice impacts, especially now that the terrorism is revealed or was revealed. So I destroyed just all of my mines, hoping that the impact of balance won't be in there. I will build 2 cavalrymen. I will build the arena. I thought about just taking and electing Pierre, maybe just saying I don't win the impact of science anyway, no need to commit to the computers, but at least it will maybe still give me 2 points, as Gandin can already destroy the multimedia if he wants to maximize what he destroys from the impact of architecture. It's still 2 points for the impact of architecture, and only 2 points less, and it at least gives me the hope that if Fjantarik and Gandin maybe push at their turn, or maybe Gandin won't even destroy a science building, that of course can happen as well, but then he probably destroys the team sports, which will be quite annoying for the impact of happiness. If that one is revealed before, he very likely will sabotage my potential impact of science, especially with having gone for the computers. That is definitely a big indicator that maybe that impact could actually be in there instead of going for Pierre. So yeah, I went for the computers, and I just at this point was really hoping that the impact of science could maybe be revealed, and ideally the impact of science and the impact of happiness before Gandin can resolve the terrorism. But now the terrorism definitely, those my hopes were getting a bit lower, but who knows, Fjantarik succeeds, at least the impact of happiness is revealed, and as you can see, that one is actually quite a strong one, especially against Gandin. I get 10 additional points against him, and maybe there's some hope that he will also push and that impact of science will be revealed. Fjantarik disbands a rifleman, builds another opera, disbands another rifleman, builds another opera, is just really maximizing his culture production. Maybe just to get the culture production, maybe there could also be something like impact of culture in there. He goes for the civil service, improves the impact of progress in government, takes the reserves oil and another copy of reserves. And I was again very interested to see what will Gandin do during his politics phase after the war will be evaluated. I was really hoping that maybe he doesn't have an aggression, maybe he has a nice impact to push, or ideally no aggression and only a mediocre impact to push. But yeah, I was very worried and hoping that maybe he will cede. First of all, the war will be evaluated. As you can see, it's a 90 culture swing, but I'm still 16 culture in the lead, and even with the production that Gandin will be getting during his turn at the moment, I'm still in the lead, but of course now there is still one politics phase action left for Gandin. And that is one that really hurts. The raid will destroy the multimedia and the drama from me, costing myself the impact of architecture, and also after also having destroyed the computer with the terrorism, really leaving my civilization with a lot of destruction and making a bunch of those impacts in there quite weaker. So I was not happy to see it, especially because with the additional resources, Gandin can also do some nice stuff. He will prepare for the impact of science that I somewhat maybe made it that he knew that it is likely in there. He goes for some dramas, builds an additional mine, prepares for some different impacts, and with the impact of science now not longer being won by me, but even by Gandin, I at this point had not really a lot of hope left. Who knows what the other impacts will be? At the moment, at least, I'm 6 culture in the lead before Gandin, but at this point, I was not too confident in my abilities to not finish last. Maybe between Fjantarik and Gandin it could also still be very close. In general, with this war, the standings got very close. Before that I had a big lead, Gandin was quite behind, now out of the sudden we are all very close together. The first impact is the impact of science. With that, Gandin will be tied with Fjantarik. Then there's the impact of balance, so sadly that impact is there in there as well, giving me now 0 points and being a very big one for Fjantarik. There is the impact of culture with destroying my theater and multimedia. Sadly also that impact has now gotten worse with the terrorism and raid, so I am getting 0 points out of this impact as well. So far all of the impacts have given me 0 points. Now at least I get some points, but the impact of government is also not really a great impact for me. And the last one is the one that was seeded by me, but after the destruction, the impact of architecture is also not really great for me. So at the end, I am last with even quite as a gap between me and Gandin, and Fjantarik at the end is able to win this game. No, so sadly not a good ending for me in this game. I was already relatively early in the game not too confident about the position that I maneuvered myself into. Maybe I shouldn't have gone for the monarchy, but being stuck on even lower civil actions for a while could have been very dangerous if I don't get rewarded by a lucky early H2 government form reveal. But I was then for a long time stuck on 5 civil actions. I made a decision to build those dramas to at least maybe have a bit of a culture lead, but Gandin then went for Bach, so he kept up in culture nicely. Then actually during H3, where I actually thought maybe with Gandin having Bach I will fall a bit behind in culture, I managed to build an even bigger culture lead, with Gandin maybe being distracted from building more dramas. But with being only on 5 civil actions, I just didn't maybe have the abilities to take all of the necessary cards, didn't have the chance to take the military theory, or I had the chance but decided against it, and I sadly also missed out on the air forces, which at the end meant that I could still somewhat nicely defend with 60 strength and try to just make my culture lead big enough to still have a chance afterwards, but sadly the war was just too big, and then the terrorism and raid just cost me lots of points for impact of science, culture, architecture. Happiness was at least revealed before those things got evaluated. So I do think I could have still had some chances if there would be no terrorism maybe and no raid, maybe just an armed intervention. Maybe it would still be not enough, it's still quite a gap, but if I win the impact of science instead of Gandin winning it, it's already a 28 culture swing. Impact of architecture would be better, so it would have at least been a bit closer, and if I get very lucky and Gandin has only a mediocre impact to play, then maybe I still, even with it getting hit by the war, have some chances to not finish last, but no, I sadly didn't have the ability to defend myself a lot better than the 60 strength that I mustered at the end. So at the end, Fjantarik is able to win the game. Congratulations to him. Gandin finishes second, managing to build up a very nice amount of military. And with that, sadly, I have lost this game. And if you remember the standings at the beginning, it was quite an important game for the standings, as those were the opponents that are at the moment, at least it looks like the biggest contenders for the first place. So now we can take a look at how the standings are looking exactly now. And as you can see, I'm now actually already 6 points behind Fjantarik. Still, it was maybe the better outcome for me that Fjantarik won the game instead of Gandin, because Fjantarik at least has still one more game finished. So if I should manage to win the last 3-player game against Gandin and Kogito, then I'm still only 1 point behind Fjantarik going into the 2-player games. But of course, now we really need to get some wins going, otherwise it's looking quite dangerous, and I might have to go into the lower bracket for the next round. And yeah, at the moment both Fjantarik and Gandin have the better position than me. I really need a nice result now in the next 3-player game, and then of course also some good results out of the 2-player games. Then I still have chances, good chances to win the group. If I just win all of my remaining games, I think I should have very good chances, maybe it's even guaranteed. But if I don't win, it gets already very, very tricky. So with that, I hope you're excited for the next game. It's a very important one. And then I say thank you for watching. I'm also interested to hear your opinion, and if you have your thoughts about the game. And then thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.